talk. We are extremely lucky this morning to have Professor Antonia Monteiro here to speak to us about butterfly eye spots. Professor Monteiro has been working on butterfly eye spots for 16 years now. She's looked at how they are made, looking at the genetics and the developmental paradigms, as well as the function of eye spots. And that's what she's going to be talking about to us today. To give you a little background on her, she started with her undergraduate degree at the University of Lisbon in Portugal. So she comes to us from Portugal, did her PhD in Edinburgh in Scotland, and then did 2 postdocs. So this is study you do after your PhD at Harvard and at the Netherlands, and all of it was on butterfly eye spots. She also, along the way, had one daughter who's with us today, which is tremendously exciting and is now highly embarrassed. And just to give you a sense that as much as science is phenomenal and we do it all the time in every waking moment, most of us also do other things as well. So to give you a little flavor of that, Professor Monteiro also works with stained glass, mosaics, and does oil painting. So with that, thank you so much for coming. We look forward to the talk.
Thank you, Erin, for the introduction. Can everybody hear me in the back? Is this a good sound? Okay, good. So I'm extremely pleased to be here today to tell you about the subject that I've been dedicating my life to. It may seem really small subject to you, but these eye spots really hold a lot of mysteries in terms of all kinds of things. And what I'm going to tell you today is some of the functions of these bullseye structures that butterflies have on the edges of their wings. What is the purpose of these structures? What do they do? Why do they vary in number and size between different species of butterfly? So let's sort of get started. Can I probably get the lights in the room just a little bit lower so that we can see the slides, just maybe the ones in the front, or even is that not something's gonna, okay. So let's sort of address this question today. Why do butterflies have eyes, or they're really called eye spots, not really eyes, but they look like eyes. So why do they have these eye spots on their wings? And I'm going to tell you about experiments that my students and I have been doing the past few years to address whether eye spots, for instance, allow butterflies to survive in the wild better than butterflies that don't have eye spots, for instance. So do eye spots have any kind of function in interactions with predators, for instance? And the other question I'm sort of going to be focusing on is whether eye spots are also important in communication between males and females. So whether they have some kind of a role in interspecific communication, meaning in sort of males sending out signals to females, females to males, and have a sort of a role in what we call sexual selection. So this is the diversity, part of the diversity that we see in butterflies. They have different numbers of eye spots. So look at this wing here. There's 3 eye spots on the wing here. There's a tiny one on this species here. These are all different species of butterflies. Sometimes they have different colors in the rings around them. They appear in different positions on the wing and so forth. There's a lot of variation in eye spot number, in eye spot size, in eye spot position. And here are some experiments that we didn't do ourselves in the lab, but these are some of the most interesting and sort of clear experiments that look at the role of eye spots in interactions with predators. In this case, we have a bird predator, a tit, and what these experimenters, what these people have done, and these experiments were done in Sweden, in Europe, with this European butterfly called the peacock butterfly. And this butterfly normally has these big eye spots at the edges of their wings. And so what Adrian Vallin did was, in one set of experiments, he asked the question, if I put a bird in a cage with these butterflies. But if I cover the eye spots on their wings with black paint, what happens to this butterfly compared with a butterfly that also has paint applied on its wings, but not covering the eye spots? And so what he found was that when birds approached these butterflies that normally were sitting with their eye spots hidden, because these eye spots are on the upper surfaces of the wings, and when the butterflies are resting, they sort of hide these eye spots. When the bird was approaching these butterflies open their wings suddenly, actually make a hissing noise when they feel that there's a predator approaching, and they rapidly display their eye spots. So when the butterflies had their eye spots still visible to the predator approached the butterfly opened and flashed its eye spots, and the bird flew away, scared off. So he was startled by this response of this insect, and he decided that he was not going to attack. However, when the eye spots were painted with the black paint, the bird startled just a little bit and still attacked the butterfly and ate. Most of these butterflies were eaten in these experiments, but almost one butterfly out of 30 was eaten when they had the eye spots present on its wings. So it looks like eye spots seem to have an important role in interactions with bird predators in this case, and they are used in these sort of startle type of defenses in interactions with these birds. Now, our butterflies, the ones we actually rear here at Yale, have a slightly different behavior. So they actually display eye spots in the exposed surface of their wings when their wings are closed, and they don't have this behavior. They don't display anything in their dorsal surfaces. They always just sit there until they are attacked by a predator. So what's happening there? So here's a little movie of an attack of a bird lizard. Whoops, let me just go back here. Let's see if I can get this. So here's a lizard that has attacked the margin of a wing of our butterfly species that has a lot of eye spots on the surface here. And it's trying to grab on to the big eye spot there on the wing. And here's coming another one. Whoops. And it attacked this one. And this particular butterfly is not going to escape. So it's actually going to be all gobbled up by this lizard. But the previous attack, the lizard attacked this area here of the butterfly preferentially. And actually, that butterfly escaped. So the wing broke off in that position where it was attacked by the lizard. And the butterfly actually flew away and survived the attack and was still able to fly and to continue laying eggs and so forth. So in this particular species that does not have that type of flashing behavior, and the eye spots are always exposed at the edges of the wings, they're exposed to predators, it looks like the function is a little bit different. Eye spots here, instead of being startling devices to startle and sort of scare off predators, they are used to deflect the attack of predators to the wing margin. So the predators attack the wing rather than the vulnerable body. And so the butterfly can survive and continue to lay eggs. So that's a different function for eye spots in different species of butterflies. So this particular species of butterfly is actually an interesting species. It has two different wing patterns in different times of the year. It's not the same animal that changes its eye spots from very small and almost absent in the dry season in Africa. This butterfly comes from Malawi, from Africa. And in Malawi, you have a dry, cool season. So it's not the same as our summers. Here, our summers are usually dry and hot. But in Malawi, you have dry and cool, so low temperatures. And then you have a wet and warm season in Africa. And the butterflies, this is the same species of butterfly. It's, if you take caterpillars and if you take eggs coming out from one female, and then you separate those eggs, and half of the eggs you rear them at low temperature, and the other half of the eggs you rear them at high temperature, you get these very different wing patterns appearing on the wings of this one species of butterfly. So this is what we call phenotypic plasticity, sort of one genome, one type of information, one species, but you can do very different things to your wing pattern depending on the environment, and in this case, the rearing conditions where the caterpillars are living in. And so why is it? Why is it that this species produces two very different wing patterns in the dry season in Africa and in the wet season in Africa? So why are eye spots smaller here, and why do eye spots get larger in the wet season? So these experiments done with these two seasonal forms were done also, just like the previous one with lizards. Birds and lizards were used to try and find out if there was any difference in terms of the attacks of these predators towards these butterflies. And what they found was that it doesn't really matter how big the eye spots are on the wing. In interactions with birds and lizards, having tiny little pupils or small little areas, small little patches of black, or in this case, in many cases, these white scales are also present, although it's difficult to see in the center of these eye spots. It doesn't matter the size of the eye spot. The birds and lizards will usually attack the edges of the wings. And so we couldn't figure out why is it that the eye spots get bigger in the wet season when they're small, they're equally effective in interactions with these two types of predators in diverting the attack towards the wing margin. So it was a real puzzle. And the other thing that we found out is that if you put these butterflies in a cage with birds and lizards, in fact, they're much more difficult to detect than these butterflies. So it's a real puzzle. If once they are detected, so once these butterflies are detected, the attacks also happen on the wing margin, but they are more difficult to detect. So why produce bigger eye spots? It was really sort of a difficult thing to explain. And so one of my postdocs in the lab recently decided to try a different predator. So instead of birds and lizards, she thought that perhaps a different type of predator with a different visual system, like praying mantises, could be involved in explaining the different sizes of the eye spots in the different seasons. So what Katie did was she placed butterflies one at a time in an arena that she constructed, a sort of a little arena, the death arena, for these butterflies. And so she would put the butterfly in the arena and then let the mantid crawl slowly towards the butterfly. And what she found was that when mantids do that, they attack the wing edges of this butterfly, but they attack the body of this butterfly. So they attack the butterfly in different areas, depending on whether they have big eye spots or no eye spots at all, or very tiny eye spots. So these predators actually attack butterflies differently, depending on whether they are on the dry season or the wet season form. So perhaps these predators that only exist in the wet season time of the year could be an important sort of predator to explain why eye spots become bigger and smaller, especially why they become bigger in the wet season and not remain small and cryptic throughout the year. Because you have birds and lizards present both in the dry season and in the wet season. For them, small eye spots are sufficient to direct the attacks towards the wing margin, away from the body. But when you have these predators that are only present in half of the year, then it's better to have bigger eye spots, because these predators are oriented towards bigger targets and they attack there preferentially, whereas they attack more often the wing body if you don't have those big targets to deflect their attacks. So in summary, for this part of the talk, it looks like eye spots can scare off predators when they are displayed suddenly. So some species of butterflies have that behavior, but others don't. So eye spots can also be used to divert the attacks of predators away from the body into the wing margin. In interactions with birds and lizards, a small eye spot is as efficient as a large eye spot in doing that, in diverting the attacks towards the wing margins. But interactions with mantids, a different type of predator, large eye spots are more efficient in deflecting the attacks away from the body towards the margin of the wing. And so it looks like in this one species of butterfly that has different eye spot sizes in different seasons of the year, it looks like they change the size of their eye spots, perhaps to match the type of predators that exist at different times of the year in these forests in Africa. Okay, so let's move on and ask the question, why do different species of butterflies have, and moths in this case, have different number and size of eye spots? So you would think that if eye spots are important in deflecting the attacks into the wing margin or scaring off predators, there should be some kind of optimal pattern, optimal number of eye spots that these butterflies and moths should all converge on to be able to function perfectly in interactions with predators. And yet, they vary all over the place. There's butterflies with different number of eye spots, different size of eye spots. Why do we have all this diversity? And here's an example. So here's the same picture I just showed you. Butterflies usually have a large number of eye spots on their wings, and they vary in number. But moths also have eye spots on their wings, and they usually have them hidden by the forewings. And they usually just have a single eye spot on each wing surface. You never see multiple eye spots in the wings of moths. So it's only one of them, and it's usually quite large. So why do we have all of this eye spot number diversity? So let me tell you about some experiments that we didn't do either in the lab, but a person called Martin Stevens in England did these experiments. And what he did was he used paper models. And this is something that you could actually do yourself if you wanted to try this at home. It's safe. You can try this at home. So what he did was he cut off pieces of paper. These are gray little triangles of paper that he printed out on the computer. And some triangles of paper, and they kind of mimic a moth as it's sitting in the tree, of a trunk of a tree. And in some pieces of paper, he put one big eye spot pattern in the middle. And in other pieces of paper, he put many little small eye spot patterns. So he was trying to figure out what is the reason for all of these different eye spot number diversity that we see in Lepidoptera. Does one eye spot or two perhaps, because two kind of mimics the head of a big predator, like of a big vertebrate animal, like, I don't know, an owl or something that is scarier than perhaps a small, tiny butterfly with tiny little eyes in the front. So if you have two, does this work better than just having one or three? So here you would have something like an eye mimic, butterflies having two eye spots that mimic the head of something bigger. But here, there's no animal that really has three eye spots in a row, so you're not really imitating the head of anything, but you have three of these, so what works better? And so he tried all kinds of combinations, and in order to test the role of these, the role of the interactions of these paper things with predators, he lured predators to come and predate on these patterns by putting a little mealworm, a munchy, a larva in the middle, on top of these pieces of paper. There was something that the birds wanted, a little mealworm attached to each one of these pattern elements. So he put hundreds and hundreds of these things in trees all over Cambridge, in the forests there, and he came back every single day and he checked how many of the mealworms had been predated, had been eaten from each one of these different patterns. And so what he found was the following. He found that these two patterns, the mealworms, stay there the longest. So birds or whatever predators, he did not know what was eating these things. Whatever predators were approaching to get the mealworm, they were not approaching these patterns as often as they were approaching the others. And this one was also just as good. There was really no statistical significant difference between the number of these that still had the mealworm and these two. So what's special about these three relative to the other three? Any ideas there? Go ahead. Yes. These ones, this one is bigger. These two are together are also just as big. And these three, in fact, together are just as big. So if you actually sum up the area of all of these circles together, the area of these three circles together is exactly the same as the area of this one. And the area of these two is the same as the area of that. But these two have a smaller combined area as these, and this one has a smaller combined area as those or those. So it looks like having one big eye spot or having multiple small eye spots seem to be just as good, just as efficient in driving off predators or sort of making predators suspicious of what these patterns are and preventing them from coming in and grabbing the mealworm. So they are sort of a little scared by either one big spot or three smaller spots. They are just as effective. And so it looks like, if you go back to this diversity of patterns that you see in the wings of moths and butterflies, perhaps having one big one or having multiple small ones is just as effective in interactions with predators. And perhaps if you change the relative sizes of your eye spots and eliminate some eye spots from the wings, sort of give more space for the others to appear, perhaps you are also equally effective in scaring off predators. And so this was the worst pattern. All the mealworms were eaten up from these little triangles of paper, and these ones were the next worst. Okay, so this is as far as a story that I have for you in terms of the function of eye spots in interactions with predators. But now let's sort of look at what eye spots do in interactions between males and females. So here's Kendra. She was one of my students, and she asked this question. Are eye spot patterns also used in interactions between males and females of the same species? And so here's a male over here and a female that are mating, and this is the species that we have in the lab. So males and females mate like this. They find each other, they decide they want to mate, and they mate with each other. And Kendra asked, are females looking at the eye spots in the males, and are they sort of choosing who to mate with because of their wing patterns, because of the males having these beautiful eye spots on their wings? Do they select a mate based on the colors that these males display? And so she did a series of experiments. We did not know what the females like. We cannot ask a butterfly, tell me, do you like the eye spots on the male? We cannot ask this question of a butterfly because they don't speak, right? They don't answer. So what we do is we do experiments. And the experiments that we do is we put a female butterfly in a cage, and we put that female with two males. And we change the pattern on each of the males. Sometimes we vary the size of the males. For instance, in a cage we put a small male and a big male, and then we see who the female likes. So we make an experiment, and the answer is given to us by the female because we ask her, who do you like to mate with? Do you like the big male or do you like the small male? And so we observe who the female picks as a mate, and then we know she likes this or she doesn't like this or she doesn't care. Okay? So when we did a small male and a big male, and this is the number of times that we did this experiment, every time we used a different female and 2 different males, one small, one big. And 27 times out of 50, the female liked to mate with the big male, but 23 times out of 50, the female mated with the small male. So females don't really care how big the male is. Half of the time they mate with the big male, half of the time with the small male. So that doesn't seem to be important at all for females. They don't care about the size of the male. Now, what about eye spots? Do they care about the size of the eye spots? So here we did another experiment. We put a female in a cage with 2 males. One had small eye spots on their exposed surface, in the ventral surface, and the other male had large eye spots. And if you look at the times that they mated with each and the other, it doesn't look like they care about the size of these ventral eye spots. They don't care. The male can have big eye spots, small eye spots. Females don't look at that. Okay, do they look at the number of eye spots that the males have? So here's a mutation that we have in our lab. Eye spots here are missing in the hind wing. And females don't care about how many eye spots males have. They're just as happy mating with this mutant with fewer eye spots than a male that has the complete row. What about these pupils? So if we block these pupils with a little bit of black paint, if we paint these pupils off, these are sort of very bright white little pupils in the center of the eye spots. Do they care? They mated just as nicely with males that have no pupils relative to males that have pupils, about half the time. So females don't seem to care at all about the eye spots that are exposed to predators and on the ventral side of the wing. Now let's look at the other side of the wing, the dorsal, the hidden surface of the wings. Okay? So we looked at the size of these eye spots on the hidden surface of the wings. So these are eye spots that are not exposed to predators and perhaps have a role in communication between males and females. But they don't seem to care much about the size of these eye spots. And we removed the gold ring from some of the eye spots. They don't seem to care either. They mate 26 times with males without the gold ring, with the gold ring. So can you imagine Kendra doing 50 experiments at a time and not finding anything? It's very frustrating, right? I mean, I would have given up by now, but she didn't, so she continued. So here she found something. She then took out the pupils on the dorsal surface of the eye spots, and look what she found here. 34 of the trials, the females mated with the males that had these white pupils on the dorsal surface, and only 16 times, almost half as much, the females mated with the males that did not have those pupils. So it looks like having a pupil is good. Females like that. So finally, at experiment number 13, whatever, she found something. She found that these pupils in the dorsal surface of the eye spots, females like them. Females like these pupils in the males. And so when you find something like this, then you sort of go a little bit further. You ask the question, okay, if we reduce the pupil, do the females care? So she painted half of the pupil away. And females seem to mate just as well with males with reduced pupils or with complete pupils. That didn't seem to phase them too much. But if you enlarge the pupil with this sort of correcting fluid that you use to correct mistakes in your homework, if you use that little white fluid that also is quite UV reflective, it has the same sort of properties as the scales of these butterflies. If you do that, females don't like that at all. So they mate preferentially with males that have the normal size pupil. They don't like enlarged pupils. They don't like that. So they don't mind small pupils, but they don't like very big pupils. So they like the males just the way they are. Just the way they are is fine, perfect. So there is what we call stabilizing selection for the size of these pupils. And then what we did was we blocked out the pupils, not with black paint, but with a substance that allows the pupils to continue to be white, but eliminates their UV reflectivity. UV is a color that we cannot see, but that butterflies can see. I'm going to show you an experiment how that was done in a minute. But all of these experiments, what they concluded is that females, so that's the pink outline butterfly over there, they like males, the blue guys over here, with pupils on their dorsal surface. That seems to be the only thing females care about in terms of eye spots on the wings of males. And they like these pupils because they are UV reflective. Let me show you this experiment, how we do these experiments in the lab. If I can get my little thing. So this is a repeat of an experiment that Kendra did. This is a male, and these are these little white pupils that they have on the hidden surfaces of their wings. And here's a UV camera that shows that these eye spots are extremely bright in the UV. And here's a male trying to court with a female. It goes around and it flashes its wings really fast right next to the eyes of the female. So that's the time when females can actually see the eye spots, the inner hidden eye spots of males. And here's, I'm applying this solution, rutin. You put it on top of the pupils, they remain white, but the UV is eliminated. You see, there's no UV signal anymore. So when the males flash their wings, there's no UV coming through. And here we're doing the choice experiments. I'm putting a male and two males and one female in one cage. And then we ask the female who she mates with. So the males try to court with the female, and the female ultimately makes their choice. I like to mate with the males that have those UV reflective pupils on their wings. And so this is how all of those experiments were done in this sort of a similar way. Okay. Now, here's the interesting thing. So these experiments showed that females don't care at all about the size, the number of eye spots that males display on the exposed surface of their wings. And as we saw before, the exposed surface of the wings are the ones that predators care about. And these are the eye spots that are involved in interactions with birds and lizards and mantids in different times of the year. So what's happening to the dorsal surface of these dry season butterflies and wet season butterflies? Nothing is happening to them. So the eye spots remain the exact same size in the dry season and in the wet season. And so we think that because these structures, these eye spots, they vary in size in the exposed surface to better adapt the butterfly to the different types of predators that exist in each season. But these eye spots, because they are used in sexual selection, in communication between males and females, and they mate both in this season and that season, these eye spots stay exactly the same size. They do not change. Predators don't seem to see them. The only function that these eye spots serve is to communicate and sort of help females make decisions about who they want to mate with. Now, here's a sort of a strange thing. So this is a photograph of these UV reflective pupils in the center of the eye spots, and here's a female, and here's the male, and this is the dorsal surface, and this is the ventral surface. So we did all of these experiments from the female's perspective. We said, what do females like? And we did all of these manipulations, putting males of each type and asking females alone what they liked. But we haven't asked males what they like. Do males also have a preference, perhaps? here's sort of what's strange about it. If females like the pupils in males, and if that is important, it explains why males have these dorsal pupils. But as you see here, females also have eye spots on the dorsal surface of their wings. Now, why do females have eye spots? Do males like to mate with females that have eye spots as well? So males have eye spots, and we know why they have them, because females like them. But females also have these dorsal eye spots. Why do they have them? Do males also pick females? Or are females the only choosy member here, sex here? So do males also care about the presence of dorsal eye spots in females? And do butterflies of the wet season and dry season make the same choices? So this was the experiment that Katie, again, decided to do. So we are intrigued. We know females like those eye spots in males, but females also carry them. So do males make a choice? So we did the exact same type of experiments that we did before. This time we only manipulated those pupils because we thought, okay, that's the important thing. Let's see if males also prefer to mate with females that have these pupils. So here's the reverse type of experiment. We have a male in blue. We put a male in a cage, and then we give them 2 females, okay? And now the females, some of them have the pupils, half of them have the pupils, and the other half don't. The same exact experiment, but now asking males what they like. And if we ask males of the wet season, they don't care. They mate just as well with females with pupils or females without pupils. So it doesn't look like males care at all what the pattern of the female looks like in the wet season. But now let's do the experiment with the dry season males. Remember, in the other season in Africa, these males come out. They look like this. And if you give these males a choice between the wet season with females with pupils and females without pupils, they prefer to mate with females with pupils. So they really prefer these females, and they don't like these females anymore. So there's something odd going on. Males at one time of the year don't care what the wing pattern of the female looks like, but males at a different time of the year, they really care what the female looks like. That's very strange. Now, the dry season females, we hadn't tested them either. We'd only done all of these experiments with wet season females. So when we now do the experiments with the dry season females, and we manipulate the pupils in males, now they don't care anymore about what the males have on their wings. So dry season females, we do these manipulations, and they mate just as nicely, just as well, with males with pupils and males without pupils. So this is all very wacky. There's sort of all kinds of changes, and the choosiness of these butterflies vary tremendously from one season in Africa to the other season in Africa. So here's sort of the summary of what we found, is that in the dry season, when the ventral surface looks like this and the dorsal surface looks like this, males are the choosy sex. Males are the ones that decide what they like. They are in control. They are in the driver's seat. Females try to mate with these males, but males are the ones that ultimately decide who they want to mate with. And they make that decision based on the presence of these dorsal eye spots in females. But in the wet season, females are the choosy sex. Females decide who they want to mate with, and they prefer to mate with eye spots with males that have the pupils on their dorsal surface. Now, why is that? Why does the choosy sex vary from the males being the choosy sex in one part of the year and the females being the choosy sex in the other part of the year? It's very intriguing. We don't know, but here's something that we do know. We know that if females, if they are of this type, if females mate with a male of a dry season, these males, when they mate with a female, they give her a lot of nutrients. So they give her a sort of they pass on sperm to fertilize her eggs. But in addition, they give females a lot of nutrients during copulation. When they're mating, they pass on lots of fats and sugars and things like that at the same time that they give them sperm. And if a female mates with one of these males, the female lives twice as long as if it had not mated at all, or if it had mated with one of these males. So males seem to be contributing to the longevity or to the ability of female to survive during the dry season when they're not really busy laying eggs because it's the dry season. There's no grasses available for them to lay eggs. All the females have to do is store nutrients, sit quietly on the forest floor, and wait until the rain comes, and then they start laying eggs when the rains come and the grasses sprout in the forest floor. And so females are actually quite busy, we think, trying to actually elicit courtship from males. So they are the ones that start harassing the males. They start going after the males, displaying their wing patterns, so doing the exact opposite of what males normally do to females and what you saw in the movie. Females are the ones that start harassing males, displaying their wing patterns, showing them their eye spots, and trying to get males to give them food. Because what they really want from males is not just the sperm. They want the food that males can give them that can help them survive through the dry season until they can lay eggs again in the wet season. And so males, at that time, they are in possession of the food, and they say, okay, show me your wing pattern and let me see if you're of my species. And essentially what we think these eye spots are doing is that they're communicating whether a certain butterfly is of the right species, because there's a lot of variation in presence or absence of these dorsal eye spots in other species of the same group that live in the same forests in Africa. And so for the males to be able to release their food, they want to make sure that they're mating with a female of their own species. And so they wait for the females to display their wing pattern. Then they say, okay, you are of my own species. Here's the nutrients. But they don't want to give those nutrients to a female of a different species that may also want nutrients just to survive through the dry season. They sort of have to make that sort of check. Okay, you have two pupils on the surface of your wings, on the dorsal surface. You're of my species. I'll give you the nutrients and the spermatophore. But in the wet season, males don't really give nutrients to females. There's a lot of fruits and banana and things like that lying around in the forest. And so the females are the ones that become the choosy sex. The females want to make sure that they're mating with the right male of their own species, and then males are the ones that have to display their wing patterns and say, look, I'm your species, I have two eye spots, mate with me. And so females become the choosy sex in the wet season, but males are the choosy sex in the dry season. And so this is sort of just a summary of what I've just told you. The pattern on the dorsal surface that these butterflies have is probably involved in species recognition. Males don't want to mate with the wrong species when they carry this nutritious, what we call spermatophore, which is only in the dry season. And so they mate, but males mate with anything. They're really ready to mate with anything in the wet season because they don't really have anything to lose. Sperm is very cheap to produce. Now, females don't care about mating with the wrong species in the dry season so much because they do want to survive through the dry season, and they really only want the food that the males can give them. But they do care about mating with the correct species in the wet season when they are the ones that are now investing a lot into the next generation, investing nutrients in egg laying. And just sort of for you to remember this, it's kind of interesting that we normally think of sexually selected traits, traits like these eye spots in the feathers of peacocks, as being traits that are only displayed by one sex, but not the other sex. So in peacocks, it's the male that has these beautiful feathers, and the peahen, the female, is a drab, dull-looking bird. But in butterflies, in our species at least, it's quite interesting. Both of these males and females, both of them have these dorsal eye spots. So you don't have a situation like this with a drab female and a good-looking male. When here in this species, the female only makes the decision of who she mates with, and she only mates with good-looking males. In butterflies, both males and females choose each other, and they select the wing patterns of each other, but they do that in different times of the year. And they select on exactly the same eye spots, but they do it in one season, the females pick the males, and in the other season, the males pick the females. And so you don't have a pattern of sexual dimorphism, males looking different from females. They actually look very similar, and yet you have strong sexual selection happening in this species. Okay, my sort of final point here is going to be going back to sort of the eye spot number diversity. We talked a little bit about how eye spots can trade off between being very large and having few of them on the wing, and being very small and many appearing on the wing. So that type of trade-off can happen because both having one big one or many small ones are equally effective in interactions with predators. But what about males and females? Do they also care about the number of eye spots that these butterflies have on the wing? And so we asked that question, and these experiments were done by Andrea, a graduate student here at Yale. So she asked, if species have different number of eye spots, do females also care about the number of eye spots that the male has on its wings? And how do females, if they do care, how can you sort of move over and sort of one species prefers perhaps 2 eye spots? Why does another species now prefer 3? How do you make the switch? How do you sort of make females perhaps evolve different preferences in different species? How does that happen? So here's an experiment that Andrea did. So she asked the question. So we know already that females prefer males that have these eye spot pupils on their wings. But look at this mutant. We have a mutant called Spotty in the lab. And this mutant has 4 spots on the wing instead of the normal 2. So what Andrea asked was, we know they like pupils, and if we turn them off, females don't like to mate with those males. But do they care about how many pupils the males have on their wings? So if we do an experiment where we put a female in a cage and we give a female a choice between a male with 2 pupils or a male with 4 pupils, do the females care about the number of pupils and eye spots that they have on their wings? So we ask, what is the innate preference of a female? And if you put a female in pink here with these 2 males and you do the experiment over and over and over again, you find out that females actually prefer males with just 2 pupils, which is the normal pattern for this species. So 26 times they mated with males with 2 pupils, and 14 times only they mated with males that have 4 pupils. So they prefer to mate with the wild-type males. Now, what happens if we train a female to like a new pattern? How do you do that? Let's say that a female comes out of its cocoon. It's hanging on the cage, sort of drawing its wings and so forth. And normally the females do not mate on the first day that they come out of the cocoon. They are too fragile, the wings are soft, they are just sitting there for about 24 hours, the whole day, they cannot mate. However, males can try to elicit courtship. I mean, they can try and convince females to mate with them. And they do that by approaching these females and flashing their wings and displaying their dorsal wing patterns. So Andrea did the following experiment. She put a female, a very young female that had just emerged that same morning, and she put that female in a cage with different types of males. So the question that she asked was, does exposure to a novel wing pattern on the first day of a female's life, does that influence her preference when she then becomes sexually mature on days 3, 4, 5, etc., when she can actually mate? So in the first day, a female was put in a cage with a slightly older male that tried to court the female and display its wing patterns to the female. And then at the end of the day, the male was removed from the cage, and the female was left alone again. And so we exposed females both to the normal wing pattern, the wild-type pattern, and to a novel wing pattern, which is the spotty wing pattern, the spotty males. And then we took these males off. So each female was only exposed to either the wild-type wing pattern or to the spotty wing pattern in the first day of their lives. So when we did that, and then on days 3 to 8, she placed that female in a cage with 2 males. And she gave a choice between the wild-type male and a spotty male. These are 2 new males that she had never seen before. And so when she does that, again, she concludes that the females continue to prefer the wild-type male if they are exposed to wild-type males on the first day of their lives. However, if females are exposed to spotty males on the first day of their lives, their innate preference changes. They become influenced by what they see on the first day of their lives. So if a female was exposed to a spotty male when she is just emerging from a cocoon, she now almost has a slight preference to mate with spotty males instead of wild-type males. So a female's preference for a particular wing pattern in its own species is very plastic. It's not fixed, genetically determined. It sort of can be influenced by what they see in the first day of their lives. And so this is very interesting. It sort of suggests that novel wing patterns, something that a female has never seen, so if there are mutations that start producing more wing spots like we observed in our lab population, these mutations can actually become preferred wing patterns simply if they're seen by a naive female in the first day of their lives. And perhaps if we can think about it sort of in longer terms in evolution, if a learned preference can then somehow become a fixed preference, and this we don't understand very well how that happens genetically. But let's assume that first a female learns something, and if it keeps learning the same thing over and over and over in subsequent generations, perhaps later on her innate preference changes. Perhaps she now prefers innately to mate with spotty males instead of wild-type males. But we don't understand how that transition could be made. But perhaps if that transition can be made, this type of plastic learning that insects have can facilitate the evolution of eyespot number variation in butterflies. And so this is my final slide, and I'll just conclude. I'll give you a sort of a summary of the different things that we covered today. It looks like eyespots. Why do butterflies have eyespots on their wings? They have them, and eyespots serve 2 different functions in nature. Eyespots seem to be important in interactions with predators birds, lizards, and insect predators like mantids. So they are important either in deflecting the attacks away from the body into the wing margin, or they could be used as startling devices to frighten away predators when they approach. And it looks like our species, Bicyclus anynana, uses these same eye spots for these, and also, sorry, so to conclude, so they are important in the interactions with predators and also in male and female communication. So they are important in natural selection and in sexual selection. And it looks like our species, Bicyclus anynana, uses these eye spots on different surfaces of the wings for these different functions. So the eye spots that are exposed when the butterfly is at rest, they seem to be important in interactions with predators. And the eye spots that are on the undersides of the wings, sort of in the hidden parts of the wings, they seem to be important in interactions between males and females. And it looks like the species can change the size of its exposed eye spots in different seasons. And the reason why it does that is because there are different predators present in one season in Africa versus the other season in Africa. And the butterflies are trying to maximize their ability to survive in each one of these seasons. And by manipulating eye spot size, you can do that very well. Okay. It looks like it's a species that, unlike peacocks, where the female is drab and the male has beautiful eye spots on its feathers, butterflies, both males and females, have these eye spots on their dorsal surface of their wings because males choose females and females choose males, and they look at the same eye spots on the same surface of the wings, but they do it in different times of the year. So it's an example of a species where there's strong sexual selection on the same wing patterns at different times of the years by both sexes. And like peacocks, when it's only the females that care about what the males have. And it looks like an imprinting, sort of a learned mechanism that females apparently have, can facilitate perhaps the evolution of eye spot number on the wings of butterflies, because what females prefer is not a fixed thing. They can actually change their preference depending on what they see on the first day of their lives. And that learning mechanism may perhaps facilitate the evolution of eye spot number diversity in butterflies. And so the experiments that I mentioned here today were mostly done by these three people, Katie Prudick, Andrea Hodgins-Davis, and Kendra Robertson, who worked with me in the lab. And they are the people that sort of provided a lot of the data that I explained to you today. And I'll take any questions from you. Thanks very much for your attention.